My name's Ennis Barbery, and today is the 8th of August, 2015, and we are interviewing some members and leaders in the Assateague people of Delmarva. So if you can say your full name and your tribal position.
My name's Michael Morabito. I'm chief of the Assateague people of Delmarva.
I'm Pam Allen, she who holds her own horses, and I'm the associate chief of the Assateague people.
And how long have you all been organized as a tribe?
23 years.
What year was that? I'm thinking back since 2015.
1986.
What in 1986? Do you know what the impetus was, or who the people were who sort of got everyone together?
Well, it was my dad and Doug would know. I know my dad was Doug.
You was in it.
Virginia.
Joe, Ken Tyler, and Sue Tyler. They basically decided that they had Assateague ancestry, and it was time to come together and to embrace their history. You know, start practicing their religion again. You know, revive their culture, because a lot of our history changed when the Europeans came here, and we had to assimilate with the new society, and we lost a lot of what we used to do and who we were, and it will be back.
And then I want to ask, sort of individually, each of you, when you were growing up, sort of when you started thinking about being part of the Assateague people, and maybe who some of your relatives were who started teaching you about it as you got involved. So,
growing up, you know, my dad had always said that, you know, he had Indian in him, and you know, we didn't really have any idea of what, you know, what Indian tribe that he belonged to, or what, you know, ancestry he had. And then in the early 80s, mid 80s, he started doing a genealogy search, and during the search he found that some of his ancestors had been part of the Assateague tribe that did not go to the reservation in Snow Hill when the white society pushed them off of South Point in Ocean City and off of the tribal areas in the Maryland, Virginia area. They acclimated in with the farmers and the watermen of Somerset and Worcester County, and they went in with the slaves and were considered free blacks. And being free blacks, they didn't have the same restrictions as the slaves did, so they intermarried in with the white farmers and the watermen, and that's how we discovered that my dad was one of the Assateague people. He didn't go onto the reservation with one of our ancestors.
So was your dad the person who started teaching you about
Yes.
about the history? What was your dad's name? I don't think you said.
His chief Medcat, his Larry Smack.
Oh, yes. Okay. So how did you sort of learn about it?
Well, I didn't grow up in this area. I grew up in New York City. One of my first memories was going to Oklahoma to meet some of our native relatives. And it was kind of a cultural shock, because my grandmother lived in Pennsylvania, and she never spoke about being Native American or Indian, or however you want to say it. But when she was in Oklahoma, she was an entirely different person. And growing up in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, if she had let anyone there know that she was Native American, she would have been shunned. You know, she wouldn't have been able to go anywhere. You know, she was growing up in the 1920s and 1930s. Things were a lot different then. You didn't talk about a lot of things. And it was actually my mother who told me that we had Native ancestry. And the only time we ever even did anything was when we went to visit our relatives in Oklahoma. And when we moved to Delaware in the 80s, I joined a sportsman's club. And I went to take my dad out to show him the piece of land we had near Gumboro, and we drove in the gate, and I hear this native music playing. I'm saying, I wonder where that's coming from. And we walk down, all of a sudden someone pops out of the woods and says, "Hey, how you doing?" And it was Pam's dad, Medicine Cat. And he introduced himself, and my dad said, "So you're an Indian?" He says, "Yeah, I'm chief of the Assateagues." My dad said, "Well, my son has native blood." "Oh, really? What tribe?" And my dad says, "Well, he's Cherokee, and we had relatives in this area, so he might be part of your tribe too." And Med said, "Well, we're having a powwow in a couple of weeks. I want you to come down there and be with us." So I said, "Okay." And that was 23 years ago, and I have been on the adventure of a lifetime. I have learned so much about our culture, our history, our religion. Medicine Cat had Assateague teachings. He had Cree and Seminole teachings. Plus, he also had some Lakota teachings. And I have been lucky enough to get all these teachings now. And it's just been amazing, the things I've learned. I am an entirely different person because of these teachings and our sweat lodge ceremony and all these things. I'm a very fortunate man.
Did you end up sort of tracing your heritage back to the Assateague people, or genealogically, or did you become more part of them through as a community?
Well, I became more part of the community by hanging around the community. My wife, Lorraine, is Medicine Cat's Hunka daughter. And Hunka is a Lakota ceremony where she's adopted. In our ways, that's a legal adoption. And I was also Chief Medicine Cat's bodyguard. And we would travel all over the country to go to sun dances and whatnot and learn a lot of things. Now, I did have ancestors who live in this area, whether they were native too, but whether they were Assateague, I have not done that genealogy. Right. I do not have any children. So at this point in my life, I don't see any need to go digging through my ancestry to connect to any one tribe.
Right.
Because in Lakota sayings, which we also adopted, Matakio Yasin, which means we are all related. The trees, the rocks, the plant, all people on this planet are all related. And that's what we live by. Everyone we meet is a relative of ours. It doesn't matter if it's a winged creature or a four-legged creature or a two-legged person. We're all related.
Oh, I was going to ask about your name before. How did you get your native name, Quiet Bear? If you feel comfortable sharing.
Medicine Cat actually gave me that name. It was at a powwow. Well, I think it was like the second or third powwow that I went to. And traditionally, you would go to a person who has the right to give names and present them a bundle, and which is a small gift, tobacco and sage and different herbs, and ask them to give you a name. Well, I hadn't done that, and he turns around and looks at me and says, "I have a name for you." I said, "What's that, Med?" He says, "Quiet Bear." And the person that was standing next to him, Red Wolf, says, "That's a perfect name." And ever since then, I've been Quiet Bear.
He used to not talk at all.
But the secret about not talking was I was listening the entire time. Because when you get around people who've walked the red road, that's what we call our life, the red road, and who've had experiences, I know a lot of kids will listen to their grandparents tell stories, and that's how you learn about who you are and things in life. And when I got around the elders, I sat there quietly and I listened to what they were saying. But I was learning the whole time. So
you really absorbed it, yeah. And how did you get? I'm so excited. How did you get your name?
As Quiet Bear said, I had to present a bundle to one of our tribal members, and it took him a couple months to get my name, because they just don't think of it. It has to come to them in a dream. And he called me at powwow when we were having powwow one time, and said he had my name, and that's how I got She Who Holds Her Own Horses. And I can tell you the meaning of it if you want.
Well, yes, I would like to know the meaning.
In Native traditions, women do not own horses. Men only own horses. And the gentleman who gave me my name because, as he said, I'm stubborn. I stand up for myself, and I would have been one of the tribal women who would have owned horses no matter what any man said.
I'm glad you asked me to share the meaning. Yeah,
and it's true.
That's really interesting.
No, it is true.
As far as the language goes, I know that's something that has been unfortunately lost over the years. But as far as what do you know about the language and what it would have been like?
The only thing that I can have found was it was an Algonquin-based language. I don't think of. I haven't found anything else.
We were Algonquin speakers. The Nanakoke and the Lenape tribes, the Nassawawash and the Akahanic tribes are also Algonquin speakers, which probably was a good thing because we all dealt with each other in this area. You know, when you get up into Jersey and farther north in Delaware, and maybe even farther south towards Cape Charles, the dialects may have been different, but Algonquin was our language. We are now starting a program where some of our elders are investigating the Algonquin language, and we're going to start teaching our tribal members some words in Algonquin and getting deeper and deeper into that so we can, you know, bring that back to our people. This has been a rebuilding effort for us to try to reconnect. A lot of our ceremonies were lost. A lot of our practices were, you know, as far as ceremonies and stuff, are lost. And we do ceremonies now, but we do a lot of Lakota ceremonies, but we change them to fit in with the area we live in. Our sweat lodge ceremony is based on the Lakota ceremony, but it's been changed for an Eastern tribe. Pam's dad, Medicine Cat, came up with that ceremony. And once we do a ceremony and we continue to do that ceremony, it then becomes an Assateague ceremony. Mm-hmm. And we are strong believers that we're responsible for the 7 generations that came before us and the 7 generations that will come after us. Mm-hmm. So we have to teach them, the 7 generations that are coming after us, we have to teach them what they need to know to continue on with this. Like we had to listen to the 7 generations before us so we could learn it. And if we don't teach our young ones, we're not living up to what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that's I wish more people would see it that way. Pam, you mentioned before that you all are an Eastern Woodlands tribe. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to be an Eastern Woodlands tribe?
Well, the Eastern Woodland Indians were mainly in the woods. They had their tribal areas in the woods. They lived off the animals and the vegetation in the woods, different than the Plains Indians where they lived in the plains area out west. It's just referring to the areas that they lived in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, they lived in the woodland areas like around Assateague across, you know, and then they would go, you know, to the waterways to get fish and shellfish. And then, you know, the woods to get deer and other, you know, animals and the plant life and things like that. So that's what Eastern Woodlands essentially is.
We're more of a stationary society than the Plains. The Plains, they would live in portable teepees and stuff, and they would actually follow the buffalo. You know, that was their food source. We, on the other hand, you know, we take to the woods in the summer and in the winter. In the summer, it would give us shade from the hot sun. In the winter, would break the wind and stuff. You wouldn't find us up on the beach in the dead of August because there was no reason for us to be there. We'd go up towards Assateague Island mainly in the spring and in the fall. Gather our shellfish and our fish. We'd smoke the fish so we'd have food over the winter. Mm-hmm. But when we got contacted by the Europeans along the coastline, we headed to the woodlands and into the swamps. They would not follow us. And we knew enough about the woods and the swamps that we could sustain ourselves. There was enough food in those swamps. There are dry areas inside the swamps, and you can find acorns in there, edible plants. So that's basically how we survived after European contact. There was a bounty on our heads in a lot of places. In Somerset County to this day, it's my understanding that there's still a price on the head of an Indian in Somerset County in 2015. That law is still on the books.
Yeah, talking about the geography more, I think that's really, really interesting. So what part of Delmarva was the Assateague peoples, you know, considered your homeland or the landscape that you all would have used?
Basically, from what my understanding is, our tribe and our sub-tribes stretch from Lewis, Delaware to Cape Charles, Virginia, mostly on the eastern side of the Pocomoke River. The Nanakoke tribe was on the western side of the Pocomoke River from basically Seaford up north towards Cambridge and Vienna in that area. But they were associated tribe with us also. We did trades with them. We traded with the Lenape. Someone once asked me, well, how did you move through the thick swamps? I said, we didn't move. If we were going far, we'd take a river. We'd take a canoe out to the ocean. That was our superhighways. If we needed to get somewhere in a hurry, that's the way we traveled.
What kind of housing did you all have here? I think I've read before, but it'd be interesting.
Take that one.
Yeah, they were long houses. Teepees are what everybody thinks of as what Indians lived in. No, the Eastern Woodlands did not use teepees. They were the plains, because they were portable. Long houses, essentially, were that they were long structures that a lot of people lived in, and they had pallets in them where you slept, and they had their fish drying in there and their meats in there, and they had their babies and their little papooses hanging on the wall essentially. But that's what a longhouse was, and they were all built in the tribal area. Wherever they were, they had longhouses. Families, were together. People were in and out. Travelers came. They were invited into the longhouses.
Mm. And do you think those would have been built like out on Chincoteague and Assateague, or would that have been more temporary?
Those would have been permanent in the wooded areas.
Okay, that's cool.
Longhouses would be set up in a way of villages. They wouldn't be just one longhouse that we all crowded into. They would be several longhouses, and it would either be families or clans that each had their own individual longhouses. And then we might have a big longhouse where the council would meet for big important meetings and stuff. But they were permanent structures, and we may have had 2 or 3 village sites throughout our territory that at different times a year, that's where we would reside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know you've already talked a little bit about the food ways and what the food and cultivation and hunting and trapping would have looked like, but if you'll talk a little bit more about that.
Hunting, we hunted all the game animals, deer, rabbit, squirrel. We built fish traps. We harvested shellfish. We did do some waterfowl hunting. I'm investigating some of the history of that right now. Atlatls, bows and arrows, or we would actually lay down in the shallows with a reed breathing pipe, and when the ducks would actually swim by us, we'd reach up and just grab their feet. And that's how we hunted ducks and waterfowl.
Oh,
of course, we hunted turkeys, and that did sustain us. Plus, we had crops that we got that the women would collect from the forest lands or the marsh areas. We did not rely on the European corn and that type of planting, because if we had a drought in a particular year, the Europeans would have a hard time because they didn't know the other food sources that were in the swamps that we knew. And that helped sustain us through the years where it was a harsh winter or a very hot, dry summer.
Mm-hmm.
But, until the Europeans came and they started market hunting, where hunters would go out and shoot as many animals they possibly could and sell the meat. We had we knew how to sustain and just take enough game from the natural resources that were available that it was always there. But the market hunting just basically, decimated the wildlife population to the point where it couldn't sustain us or the Europeans anymore.
If you sort of had to tell the story or sum up what happened after the Europeans came to the Assateague people, and how they had to move, what you were talking about before, they were basically driven into the swamps and into places where they could survive still, but where it seemed like it was less likely for the Europeans to follow them there because they wouldn't have known how to survive. But if you could just talk a little bit more about there's the first encounter with the Europeans, and then what happened to the tribe after that.
From what I understand, and this is passed down orally, we welcomed the first Europeans that came here. We showed them, how we lived, and that worked out fine. We helped them with food resources and sustaining them and getting them established. And then it became a problem because they wanted more and more land. They at one point, each individual Indian needed permission from the government authorities, which was probably a governor at the time or on a more local basis, each individual needed a permit to hunt. It wasn't granted to an entire tribe. So we started having more and more conflicts, and it was just easier for us to move into the swamps and evade detection. We could survive in there, and the Europeans would not follow. They didn't see any need or usefulness out of a swamp. There was no resources. It was hard to farm. So that's how we survived. And over time, as the swamp is a very small ecosystem and cannot really sustain a large number of people for a long time, we had to come out of the swamps. And the only way to survive was to start to mingle in with the European society. A lot of us went and lived with slaves and intermarried with a lot of the native blacks that were here, and some of us with the Europeans that were here. And if you knew about your culture, which was very rarely talked about, you know, you kept quiet about it because you would be persecuted. A lot of the churches in this area are now starting to realize what went on in their part in putting down the Native Americans and persecuting them, and they're looking for ways to apologize to the Native people now. And I'm glad that dialogue has finally, you know, come about. You know, Native Americans, not just on the Eastern Shore, but across this country, had a real hard time. They were called, you know, a lot of bad names, savages and heathens and all this. And we try to teach our young people about this, but we emphasize that they do not, please do not dwell on this. Do not let it define who you are today. Remember the history, but also know that you're better than that and you could do anything you put your mind to.
That's perfect for my next question. What's the vision that you have for the future of the Assateague people? And maybe you both have answers to that, but what do you think the future should look like for the Assateague people?
Number one, I want to make sure that in the future, what we've started, what Chief Medicine Cat has started, and some of the older elders who have left us have started, we need to continue. We need to remember our ceremonies, teach our ceremonies, relearn our language. At some point, I'd like to see us be able to have a piece of land where we can hold ceremonies, where we can maybe have a cultural center and a museum of our own, and be able to teach other people about us, that we are still here, because that's a misconception that we no longer exist. I'd like to see us be able to get to the point where we can offer our young people scholarships to go to school, high school, college, you know, maybe become doctors and lawyers. Who knows, maybe one day this country will have a Native American president. I got one young person in mind for that. Am's son Matthew, he has the highest hopes.
So, ice to an Eskimo.
What about you, Pam? Do you have anything you want to talk about for the future of the tribe?
I think I agree with Quiet Bear, but just really getting the public and, you know, the people of this area to understand that, you know, there is a Native American presence here, and we don't play Indian. We're not playing Indian. You know, I see it all the time on, you know, social media that, you know, people play Indian. We don't play Indian. There are natives still here. You know, you have the Nanakokes, you have the Aztecs, the Acahonics, and the Nasewiwa. We're here, and I think the public needs to know that and not look at us when we say we're native, like, you know, right. You know, and getting out there and you know, having a future visitor center, museum, or cultural center, I think that would help portray, you know, the presence here, you know, which we don't have, because a lot of people don't see the Assateague, you know, and Chincoteague as being an area that the native peoples used to utilize. They see Chincoteague and Assateague as tourists. They see it as the ponies. They see it as, you know, a place where people fished and got, you know, the whatever was in the waters. They didn't see it as a place where Indians used to live.
Are there any other misconceptions that you want to talk about that people should just know that that's not what happened, or that's not how this is?
Native Americans don't go how. We don't do that.
No. We don't do either.
No.
Don't you do it, cricket.
We all don't have red skin. We aren't all brown. You know, my dad always used to say that likely the natives who were here were tanned because they're out in the sun, but you know, some of them may have had blue eyes, some of them may have had blonde hair. It's hard to say. You know, you can't say that a native person looks like the one that is on TV. You know, the ones who are on TV is the stereotypical Native American. You know, the ones that everybody thinks they should look like. You know, they're based more on the Plains Indians because they were the darker skinned with the dark hair and things like that. So, you know, people would be amazed. They may have been blonde hair, blue eyed Native Americans here.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us are full-bloods anymore.
No.
I don't think there's one full-blood Assateague anymore.
Mm-mm.
There's very few full-blood Indians anywhere anymore, unless they're isolated on a reservation. You might find some there, but another big misconception is people call our regalia, which is our clothing that we very rarely wear except on special occasions, they call that a costume. You know, it is not a costume. That's part of our clothing. Mm-hmm. That is our finest wear that we'll take out to a powwow or a ceremony. It's not what we wore every day, but they love to refer to it as a costume. And, you know, that's just a misconception. You really can't get too angry or upset over it, but it's good. It's a good opportunity to explain, you know, this is what it is and this is what it's about. I mean, there's a lot of controversy right now over Redskins football team's name. There's big controversies over non-natives wearing headdresses, models for photo shoots and stuff. And I've seen things on social media where it says, they'll have a picture of a war bonnet and it'll say, I'm Indian and I don't have a right to wear this. What makes you think you do? You know, but the whole thing around that is you need to educate the public on why not every native can wear that war bonnet and what the symbolism is. You know, you can't get mad at somebody who puts something on their head for a picture and they don't understand what it means to wear that. You know, I think we need to get out there and educate the public that only a highly decorated warrior would have that many feathers to make a war bonnet. You know, not every Indian has earned that many feathers. Those feathers are earned, and that's just something that, you know, we need to educate people. You know, getting back to the Redskin controversy, yeah, it's offensive. You know, it's a stereotype. Personally, I think the Washington logo looks really good. I like the logo. If they would maybe change their name to the Washington Warriors, you know, I think that would probably settle a lot of the controversy. The owner of the Redskins would make a fortune just in new marketing. You know, all their fans would have to have the new merchandise with the Warriors on it. Mm-hmm. But my whole thing is, the Native Americans on the reservation have the highest unemployment in the country. They have the highest teenage suicide rate. The life expectancy of a male on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota is 42 years of age. The alcoholism rate is high. My whole thing is we need to work on that before we worry about a football team name. Let's help our people before we worry about that football team name.
Mm-hmm. What is the meaning of a powwow? What's the purpose of that? And maybe one or both of you could talk a little bit about that.
A powwow is a coming together of the tribe and other tribes. It's almost like a big, huge family reunion. We all come together and we dance and we sing and we hear the drum and we become, you know, one with the drum and one, you know, with each other. We eat, we laugh, we cry. You know, it's a big celebration. And you know, during that time, you know, seeing people from other tribes and friends that we, you know, haven't seen in a while and making new friends lifts our spirits so much. You know, powwow is such a cleansing time for us, you know, because we get out there and you know, see members of our tribe that we don't get to see all the time. You know, we have one who's in Arizona. Mm-hmm. We have some who you know, live far away that can't come to our tribal meetings all the time. So we get to see them and get to, you know, celebrate with them, you know, each year. And it's kind of like a big, huge family reunion. And there's a lot of ceremonies that go. You know, we do a Tanupa ceremony at the beginning as a cleansing. You know, we have special dances. We do an honors dance if somebody's passed. And a lot of our dances have special meanings.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them are medicine dances.
Yeah.
Like the jingle dress dance. That is a special woman's dance. And my understanding is it's a healing
Yes.
medicine that the dancer is actually doing when she's out there dancing in the jingle dress.
That's the purpose of the jingles. The swaying and the bouncing of the jingles together is helps almost kind of like cleanse, because there's the jingles on the dress. You earn the jingles, and if the girl wants to be a jingle dancer, then she starts rolling her own jingles, and then they're added to the dress. And as you get older, you add more and more and more. I jingle danced for a couple of years. They're very heavy. But it's a very beautiful dance. Somebody who is a really dedicated jingle dancer. It's a very beautiful dance.
The jingles actually that are on the dress were made out of tobacco tin lids that people would discard, but the Native Americans, they're quite handy and would find a use for just about anything.
Yeah.
We'd recycle those.
Were the original reduce, reuse, recycles.
Yeah.
Yeah. She didn't disrupt though. She was very good.
No, she is very good. Nagi's the troublemaker. Cricket, ring your bells. Oh, he's coming in for a close-up.
I'm sure Christine's got that handled.